Recently, Ken Ham and Bill Nye held a debate about whether creationism is a viable model of origins. I won't go into an analysis, it was far too long, and I've written an overview anyway on the Potholder 54 Facebook page. What I thought worth addressing was Ken Ham's attempt to redefine the word science.
What is science? Well, the origin of the word comes from the classical Latin scientia, which means to know. There's experimental or observational science, as we call it. That's using the scientific method: observation, measurement, experiment, testing.
Oh, that's fine. That's the definition most scientists would generally accept. Science is knowledge, but it's knowledge gained through the scientific method, in short, observation and inference. And the tenets of the scientific method are exactly the same whether you're a geologist, a botanist, or a space physicist. But then Ham tries to overturn the way science has been practiced for hundreds of years in just about every scientific discipline in every country in the world. It's a bit ambitious, but let's see how he goes.
There's experimental or observational science, as we call it.
Let me stop you there, Ken. As you call it. So we've established up front that this is a name you've come up with. As far as scientists are concerned, all science is observational, so coming up with the name observational science is like coining the term moving NASCAR. So now Ham is going to try to drive a wedge between the sciences that are indifferent to his beliefs, like software engineering, and those that contradict the Bible, like geology, biology, and astronomy. The first thing he does is make up another new term.
When you're talking about the past, we like to call that origins or historical science.
So we like to call that origins or historical science. Just checking.
Public school textbooks are using the same word science for observational science and historical science.
Yes, Ken, because to the public school system and to universities and to scientific institutions worldwide, there's no distinction between what you call observational and historical science. All science is observational, including those disciplines you've labelled historical. We can't observe the Earth orbiting the Sun, but we can infer it from observations of the retrograde motion of Mars and the phases of Venus. We can't observe the structure of the atom, or what causes an earthquake, but we can infer these things through other observations. No scientific theory, from heliocentric theory to atomic theory to plate tectonic theory, has ever been observed. It's been inferred from thousands of observations. So paleontology, the scientific discipline that charts evolution over hundreds of millions of years, is based on observation and inference, just like every other science. Paleontologists weren't there 68 million years ago to observe this Triceratops, but we can observe its fossil remains, and we can observe footprints, eggs, and fossilized feces of dinosaurs like this to know how they lived, what they ate, and from the ground they walked on, what sort of environment they inhabited. Paleontologists also observe very carefully the changes in morphology of fossil organisms moving up through geological layers of rock in which the organisms were buried. And whether the layers are thousands or millions of years old, either way, paleontologists can make the obvious inference that the organism is changing over time. But according to the historical science argument, paleontologists can't use the evidence they observe to make these inferences because they weren't physically there. And then someone came forward in the debate to refute all that. Ken Ham's argument was brilliantly and successfully demolished by Ken Ham.
We would say, as creationists, and we have many creation scientists who've researched this, and for lots of reasons, I would say the kind in Genesis 1 really is more at the family level of classification. For instance, there's one dog kind, there's one cat kind, even though you have different genera, different species. And you see, based on the biblical account there in Genesis 1, creationists have drawn up what they believe is a creation orchard. In other words, they're saying, look, there's great variation in the genetics of dogs and finches and so on. And so over time, particularly after Noah's flood, you'd expect, if there were two dogs, for instance, you could end up with different species of dogs because there's an incredible amount of variability in the genes of any creature.
So what's Ken Ham just done? He's used observations of animals today, the observation that there's a wide variety of them, the observation that similar animal species are morphologically similar, the observation that each offspring has a different genetic makeup to its parents. He's used all these observations to make an inference about what happened in the past. He's even got a drawing of a triceratops, which means he accepts they once roamed the earth along with other dinosaurs, and he only reached that conclusion based on observations of fossilized bones. No, he didn't get all this from the Bible. The idea that the different kinds evolved into the wide variety of organisms we see today through natural selection is something Ham tells us he and his team of researchers have come up with through observation. And he certainly didn't get his detailed understanding of the Triceratops from the Bible, he got it from the fossil record. The only part of this picture Ken Ham got from the Bible was his starting point, the blind belief that two of each kind of animal emerged from an ark 4,000 years ago. So since Ham accepts that observations can indeed tell us what happened in the past, then observations from the fossil record showing no such sudden appearance of animal families override that blind belief. That's why creationism isn't a viable model, Ken. As you admit, it's based on belief. And as you yourself said, science has to be based on observation.